I know we're cutting into your lunch hour a little bit, but I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit more about the SARE program and ask for your help before we get started back with the formal drafting program. Don't know how many details to give you, but in a nutshell, SARE is a tiny little part of a USDA program, and in the North Central region, each of the North Central region, 12 states gets $50,000. It's a renewable application process. Last year they went to a 2-year budget cycle on that and a 2-year plan of work, so that was a year ago. So this October we will have to submit again a 2-year plan of work, cover 2017, 2018, and all the in-service trainings that we want to do, we have to have them identified to build them into that plan of work. So this year, the way we worked it up is we budgeted roughly $8,200 for each of the 4 in-service trainings we were doing this year. And any of those monies that are not expended doing the in-service trainings become kind of what I think of as de-obligated monies. Anybody had a SARE travel scholarship? Jennifer? Anybody else had one? Susan, Tim? That's where that money comes from. It's leftover professional development dollars. That's the string that's on it. It's all professional development dollars. And there's also mini grants available at the state level, and that also is where those monies come from. Is anything that's unexpended, then it's kind of slush money, carried over from year to year. So that's how we fund the travel scholarships and the mini grants. So if you guys have something that meets one of those criteria, if you're wanting professional development dollars to attend a conference or national conference or something, we can help with that some. Jim, I think you had a travel scholarship, didn't you, for Missouri Organic Association 2 years ago? Is that right? And so where I'm going with all this is, in the next 60 days probably, I'm going to try to send out a template asking for proposals or ideas that you all have for in-service trainings for 2017 and 2018. So before of them in 2017, 4 of them in 2018, somewhere around $8,800 or $8,500 available for each one of those trainings if we stay in the same format. If they're cheaper, we can do more of them. So that's my ask for help. If there's something that you think you want training on, please let us know. If you take that template when it comes out and write it up if you're willing to head it up. If you're not willing to take the lead on putting it together, like Turia and Dr. Drinkline, the leads on putting this one together, find somebody else to do it, find somebody else to work with and send it in so we can get you guys what you need. I'll stop there. Any questions about any of that?
Thank you.
Dr. Sharma has a mini grant.
Yes, I have mini grant, and I also would like to announce maybe my ISC next month. Okay, so my name is Ajay Sharma. I work at Lincoln University. I'm a forester by profession, and I will be hosting another workshop just structured just like this on 25th and 26th May, and it's on woodland management and agroforestry. So we have a very impressive lineup of speakers and contents. We'll learn about how to inventory and value your stands, your woodlands, and how you can convert woodlands into silvopastures or pastures into silvopastures. And we'll have a presentation on cost share programs that landowners could use to meet some of their financial obligations, and how to identify and identify insects, pests, and keep your woods safe, as well as agroforests. We'll have 2 outdoor sessions. One is like going into the woods and learning how to measure your woods and identifying some potential problems. Then learning marking techniques to actually convert it into silvopastures and some other vegetation management tools. We'll also learn how to cultivate shiitake mushroom. So we'll have actually hands-on exercises where we'll take a log of wood, we'll drill it, we'll inoculate it, seal it with a wax, how to actually do it. And so all these things, and also how to sell your timber, how to find a buyer, how to develop bids, what goes on, how to make most of what you have. So we have a lot of things going on. We'll have speakers like Gene Garrett, speakers from MDC, NRCS, Mike Gold. So if you can, please register for that workshop, and that I hope probably is of interest to everyone, irrespective of your specialization, and it would be a good experience, I hope. So it will be right here. You will get an email in next maybe 2 weeks or so how to register, and we'll follow up more at that time. So.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Sharma. And then the last one I wanted to share with you, Dr. Sharma reminded me, in June 7th and 8th, we have another in-service training to be held here at Lincoln, and it's on disease and parasite control in small ruminants. Dr. Charlotte Clifford Rathert is the one heading that up. For any of you that don't know Charlotte, amongst other things, she's a DVM, and she also works with APHIS, USDA disease programs and control there. She's the one that's heading that up, and we've had a couple of folks inquire about it. I don't even know what the string of letters represents, like MSTFA and all those. There's 5 or 6 of those acronyms out there, and we've had a couple of folks say, if I attend this workshop, am I a credentialed trainer in that area? And Charlotte's response to them is that is the intent, that she is a certified trained trainer. So anybody that deals with the sheep and goats calls that come into your office, Missouri is number 5 in goat production now. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Downey.
they still did that, or they didn't have the fall tour like they did last year. Oh, there's not gonna be one in the.
That's a North Central Saratoga Food, Fiber, and Fuel Network tour. They did one in North Dakota last fall, and they're not doing one in 2017. They're planning on it in 2018.
We will continue our training today with Dr. Myers, and she's going to talk to us about successful building of grafted vegetables. I did distribute to you our fact sheet on how to build a healing shelter for grafted vegetables. We work with a lot of limited resource farmers, so this is really kind of very basic, and it is done by the members of the team of the Commercial Vegetable Program. It has step by step, so I'm sure that Dr. Myers will probably have some more ideas about how to improve it or make it simpler. So thank you, Dr. Myers.
Thank you. See if there's any more. Oh, there it is, sorry, just missed it.
I didn't see it.
Well, I thought it was still plugged in there. All right, so hopefully everybody understands the differentiation between grafting plants, so that's the splicing and dicing is, we like to say, pretty easy, right? But that's really kind of not where the work is. The work is really in healing. And so this is where I think you have to start, paying attention and start looking at what the opportunities are to make this work for you in your area. So I wanted to just kind of give you this slide to give you a reference to the history of vegetable grafting, because vegetable grafting is a very old technique. It goes back, the first written record on vegetable grafting is 500 AD. So that's 1,500 years ago. And it was in China describing self-grafting of a gourd, a squash plant. And you can just follow that down. These are written records. I'm sure there's a lot of work done, in between, but these are the written records that we have. 1600s, Korea, there's a Korean text describing grafting with gourds. 1920s, as Kerry said in his presentation, this is when vegetable grafting entered the commercial world as we know commercial vegetable production. So that's 100 years ago. So 100 years ago in Japan, a watermelon farmer started experimenting with grafting to control Fusarium wilt. And Fusarium wilt is probably one of the drivers behind vegetable grafting worldwide. So managing Fusarium wilt. And then the driver in Europe, I will say, going into the 1990s, was the elimination of methyl bromide. So with the Kyoto Agreement eliminating methyl bromide from production, which everybody in all first world countries in the world signed except the United States, they just cold turkey went away from methyl bromide. They had to find something else to do, and vegetable grafting already existed, was well documented, well utilized, and it just stepped in and within a couple of years replaced the technology of fumigation in Europe. We did not eliminate methyl bromide from our systems. We are in a phase out, and we're still in a phase out 20 years later. So we just haven't been forced to adopt and look at other technologies seriously. that's one of the reasons why we haven't adopted vegetable grafting, in my opinion. There are other reasons as well, but that's, since methyl bromide is what pushed Europe, I know that's not what pushed us because we didn't give it up. Okay, so 1930s, commercial adoption of watermelons in Japan. 1946 was the first use of vegetable grafting in the United States. It was in the southeast region. 1950s, commercial adoption of grafted tomatoes in Japan. So again, that's almost 70 years ago now that the commercial tomato industry moved to grafting. 1960s to the 80s, the Japanese seed companies introduced grafting into the European production systems, and essentially all the greenhouse vegetables in Europe are grafted. As of now, 1990s, the European companies introduced grafting into Canada. So that's 20, going on 30 years ago now. And then grafting has come into the United States since 2000. So we are indeed very slow to this game for many reasons, or several big reasons. Methyl bromide being number one. Number two is we're not land bound. When we have a problem on this field, we go to that field. When we have a problem in this state, we go to that state. When we have a problem in the U.S., we go to Mexico. We go to South America. We just go somewhere else and we import. And if you look around the world and you look at their production systems, they farm a field the size of this room, and they've been farming that field for thousands of years. And their family is there and they're not moving. So land intensification, access to land, access to exports, imports, really has just not pushed the United States into looking at alternatives to chemicals when it comes to soil-borne issues. All right, so I just wanted to give you a really big picture because I want you to know that grafting, vegetable grafting, is a very old technology. It's not new at all. So when you look at current use of grafted vegetables in the United States, as of a couple of years ago, I put the slide together last year based on data. That's a couple of years because it takes years to publish the data. Asia, 95% of the watermelon, 40% eggplant, 28% of tomato was grafted. Greenhouse production, 90% of eggplant and tomato in greenhouses are grafted throughout Asia. Europe and the Middle East, 20 to 80% grafted vegetables, primarily for disease-resistant and salt tolerance. The whole Mediterranean rim is all salt issues. So if you look around, you've got the Mediterranean Ocean, all those countries around, so Spain, Italy, France to some extent, Turkey, that's all salt issues, and that's why they're grafting. Morocco now going into Tunisia, Egypt now going into Libya, they're all grafting. North America, Canada, 90% of the greenhouse or hothouse tomato production. Mexico, they adopted open field tomato production for disease resistance 10, 15 years ago. And in the U.S., grafting has entered the U.S. through the greenhouse tomato cucumber production in California. And then really the small scale production that Kerry has been a part of in his graduate program and the project he's been involved with for many years. So they're really, Mary Pete, I think, can take ownership for really introducing vegetable grafting into this region of the United States. All right, so just wanted to give you that background. I think it's really important to understand the history and the background. So now I just want to give you some slides that show you commercial vegetable production in a few places. This is North America, so this is Canada. This is just across the border from me. So I'm in Northwest Washington, so if you just drive 80 miles north of me, you're in this place here in Canada and British Columbia. And up until a few years ago, really up until Plug Connections came into the market, this was the only supplier of grafted plants in North America, certainly on the West Coast. And then there's another company, a similar company outside of Montreal that's provided, the East Coast. So this is vegetable grafting. These ladies, there's 12 ladies sitting at these tables. It's hard to see from this slide, but that's actually a conveyor belt. These ladies are, partitioning tasks. One lady cuts the rootstock, one lady cuts the scion, one clips, one inserts. The trays then go on this conveyor belt. They go down the end here, and then another lady picks them up and puts them over here, and then they move over to the grafting chambers. So they had about a 95% success rate. 12 workers right here graft 30,000 plants a day in an 8.5-hour day. So that's the grafting environment. That's what vegetable grafting really looks like in major production systems. It's, for the most part, women sitting at a table inside a greenhouse, handling the plant material, and the grafting and the healing is all done, within a very close proximity. This is the healing chamber, so the ladies are sitting over here, The trays, as the trays come off the conveyor belt, they just go on this nursery rack. They're put on the floor here, covered with clear plastic. This is foam core board that's just put on top of that, and that's healing. And those plants are kept there for about 3 days, and then they come out of there, and then they transition through the greenhouse, and then they're on the bench and ready to go out the door in about 2 weeks. So 14 days, they're on the truck going out to their final destination. And this structure then is called a healing chamber. So hopefully that's a term that you're all familiar with. So this is Plug Connections. We went down a couple of years ago. So this is before Hyundai arrived. This is a year before Hyundai arrived. And this is what grafting looked like down in Plug Connections. So this is where John is. So I hope you see a theme here. Ladies sitting at some tables, sitting down, cutting and grafting plants. And then right to the side of them are these nursery carts. All the grafted plants go on the nursery carts. They get covered with this white plastic, clipped. That's the healing chamber. Very simple, very low technology. This is not complicated. It does not have to be complicated. Now, the key here is that this is in a greenhouse, and it's hard to see here, but it's shade cloth covered. So this is Southern California, very high light, very hot, certainly by my standards. So the whole greenhouse structure actually itself is shaded. And then the next picture will show you the benches over here. This is all humidified. So there's high humidity in the greenhouse itself, and the greenhouse is shaded. So the plants come out of here in a couple of days, and then they go on the bench at the other end of the greenhouse right here. And then those are misters. And that's the healing, and then they go, so that's healing completed. Then they go into the greenhouse right next door, and then again, they're on the truck and out the door in a couple of, within about 2 weeks from grafting thereabouts. So that's grafting at Plug Connections down in California. This is a small farm, not too far. This is also in Vista, California, so not too far from Plug Connections. This is a Japanese vegetable farmer, and this is his farm, and here are his grafters. So himself, that's his seat right there. He takes 3 of his farm workers, and in the springtime, they graft all of their transplants for his production. And so here they are grafting. There you can see all the plant material. Here you can see all the plant material being grown for grafting. And right over here are the healing chambers. And this is what those healing chambers look like. So it's hard to see here, but here's the plastic here. So it's all being removed. So under this here, you can see the shade cloth is down. The plastic is right underneath that. So really what he's doing is he's putting the plants on the bench in the greenhouse, and then using the clear plastic, which basically just traps the humidity. The function of the plastic is to trap the humidity around the plants. That's the function. And then the shade cloth reduces the light penetration. So you've got those 2 things going on concurrently for a period of days, and then the plastic comes off and the shade cloth comes off, and that all comes off within a couple of days of each other, such that then you have open plants to the greenhouse. These are Shin's pictures from China, and she just wanted me to share these with you. So Shin is down at the University of Florida. This is the watermelon grafting that we saw when we were down there, over in China a couple of years ago now. And so these are all the plants that have already been healed. So here they just piled, just stacked the plants, laid the plants on the benches, and this is just like polyethylene plastic, like shrink wrap. Right? It's thin plastic, one-use plastic, and they just pulled it all the way down, tucked it under the sides, and that's their healing chamber. So incredibly low technology, just not really very complicated. And then after a couple of days, that comes off, and then the plants are just fully exposed to the greenhouse conditions. And then again, this is from Shin. This is another grafting place. This is in Taiwan. And so here you can see these are outside healing chambers. So here are the flats of plants, hoops over here, and then the clear plastic and the shade cloth here. And you can just see what those look like. Those are watermelons under there. So if your temperature is appropriate, you can do all of this outside. This is my Washington State University at Mount Vernon. This is the healing chamber that we designed, and there's nothing at all special about this. Really, all you want is a structure over which you can put your plastic and your shade cloth. So the hoops, I hope you've seen the designs here. Many people just do it on the bench in the greenhouse, just to hoop over that bench. Really, the whole function of the hoop is simply to keep that plastic off, but as you saw in China, they put the plastic right on the plant. So you really have to just balance what you can do and what works for you. I will say that I had a graduate student who tested the use of the humidifier, which you'll see in the back there, and the system that we ended up going with, which is we just missed. So what we do is, because you need to get humidity up. So you need to control temperature, you need to control light, you need to get humidity up. So we actually tested the use of a humidifier and the use of just passive water. So what we do is we just put water in the bottom here, so this is plastic. We put water in the bottom here, put our plants in, and close it up. Well, if you've got enough water in there, you're going to get 100% humidity because you've just closed it up and the temperature goes up. And actually what the issue is you want to not put too much water in there. You don't need to do an active humidifier in a chamber at all to get your humidity in. You just need to put water into a closed unit, whatever that unit might look like, okay? And then this is what we do with the master gardeners. So I've been teaching, grafting to master gardeners, and I say, well, just bring a tub, just a plastic tub. I like the clear ones because you can see your plants. Doesn't have to be clear. And then this is just a garbage bag that you can either put the tub in or put it over the tub, and then you can just, manipulate that as you want. When they take their plants home with them, this tub is the right side up with the top on the top. But when they get home, I encourage them to do this because that way you can lift the top up and start acclimating your plants. So that's what this is. And then we just spray the area here. We used to spray our plants, and I will tell you that we no longer spray our plants. We spray the walls and we spray the floor. But if you put free moisture under those plants, we end up with a lot of disease and a lot of rot, and that's where we're losing our plants. So one of the big changes we've made over the last couple of years is we don't spray the plants anymore, we spray the structure. So the keys to healing plants are to understand these three principles in my mind. So one of them is you want to have some level of darkness here to reduce photosynthesis. Because when the plant photosynthesizes, it's losing water. The water molecule gets broken apart. So light comes down, breaks apart the water molecule, and you lose water from the scion. Well, the scion isn't able to take water up from the rootstock because it's not healed. So you want to reduce the amount of photosynthesis that the plant is undergoing. And you do that simply by darkening the plant. So that's the function of darkening, is to reduce photosynthesis. There's some question about how much dark you need to have the plant in order to get good success, and I'll show you an experiment we're doing here next. Then the second thing is that relative humidity. In general, we tend to think 100% relative humidity is what you want to achieve, but I don't actually think that's necessary, and looking around the world what different people are doing, 100% probably is not necessary, and it all depends on what crop you're growing. So tomatoes, as I said, anybody can graft a tomato, and they're incredibly forgiving, and certainly 100% humidity is not required for a tomato. Watermelon is not very forgiving, and with watermelon, I think you need to know what your numbers are, and then you need to stay within a few percent of those. And then issue of temperature. So what we found is that for tomatoes, 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit for a tomato works really well. However, a tomato is incredibly forgiving. Plus 5 or 10 degrees on a tomato, minus 5, plus 10 on a tomato, you're not going to kill it. It tends to survive. It may not be optimal, it may take a little bit longer, but you'll get survival. Watermelon, on the other hand, we're finding 80 to 85 degrees works really well with a watermelon, and plus or minus 2 degrees, and it's not happening. So we're just still trying to dial in for us what works on a watermelon. So I'm going to just give you an example of a healing schedule. And on the following example, day 1 is the day of grafting, and this is just an example of what we're working with some of our crops. So day 1, you graft, you put your plants in, you close the whole chamber, so you can see the chamber in the back there, you close the chamber such that you've got the clear plastic buttoned up, and that is so that you don't lose your humidity. The reason you close the plastic is you keep your humidity in the chamber, okay? That's all you need to do. Day 2, keep it closed, we keep it covered. Day 3 is now you're starting to open it up. So you start to remove the plastic, you start to open it up, and from day 3 onwards, you start to go to having those plants completely exposed on the bench. Now, that schedule from day 3 onwards is probably going to be different for you based on exactly where you are, what crop you're working with, what the temperature is, how much sunlight you get, and you just have to read your plants. So if your plants start to wilt, then you need to, baby them along a little bit. But if they stay perky and you're not losing moisture, then you know that they're just ready to transition faster. And you'll get a sense of that within a couple of hours. I mean, within a couple of hours, that plant will wilt and it'll tell you it's not happy yet. So this is just an example of what works for us, but you're going to have to figure this out in your own area. And when that sun comes out, and if you're in a greenhouse, our greenhouse doesn't have shade over it, that sun comes out, everything changes. So I think everything you can do to control the amount of light that comes into the area where you're healing, you're going to be better off in the long run. I think I just have to make that switch over in my operation, but I haven't done that yet. Because we're grafting in the middle of a greenhouse where we have a lot of other things going on. But I just need to make that change. All right, so this is what our plants look like. This is watermelon 5 days after they come out of the healing chamber. So here's our healing chamber in the back here. So 5 days after they come out of here, this is what our watermelon look like. And we're doing pretty well with our watermelon right now. I'm pretty happy with it. I still want to get, my goal with watermelon, if I could get 90+% success with watermelon, I'd be really happy. We're about 80% right now, pretty consistently, but I'd like to push it up there. But that's what the plants look like, and that's what you want to see. However, that's not what you always see. So here's a nicely grafted plant. There's success. And unfortunately, I don't know if you can see this, but too often, you see this. And if you see that more than 20% of the time, I don't know if you can see that, but that is a wilted dead scion right there. There's the grafting clip, and there's the dead scion. And if you see that more than 20% of the time, then, you're not doing it right. Something has to change, and you're going to have to go back and you tweak. So what I'm just going to go through a couple of things that we're doing in my program. I work with the largest organic eggplant grower in Washington State. And I like to say that kind of tongue-in-cheek because he has like 5 acres. 5 acres of eggplant organic, it's the largest grower in the state. But he has a huge problem with verticillium wilt. And he has no alternative control verticillium wilt. So we're looking at grafting to do that. And so what we're doing is we're looking at grafting onto tomato rootstocks, and I just wanted to point out that we're also grafting onto tomato. So we have very good success in our climate with growing Cherokee Purple. Cherokee Purple in our climate does not succumb to verticillium wilt. So my lesson there, and it took me a little while to figure this out, I don't know how many pathologists we have in the room here, but verticillium wilt, so first off, for tomato, there's 2 races, race 1 and 2. And you heard Carrie mention that there's now resistance to race 2. We only have race 1. So basically all tomatoes grown in Washington State are resistant to verticillium wilt because we don't have race 2, so our resistance hasn't broken down. So tomatoes in Washington State, we don't have a verticillium wilt problem. So I can use tomatoes as rootstock for eggplant. Okay? If I'm trying to control verticillium wilt, I can use tomatoes as a rootstock. So that's what we started to explore with this series of experiments. The other thing I want to mention to you is when you're working with a disease like verticillium wilt, understand that race 1 and 2 on watermelon are not the same as race 1 and 2 on tomato. And I still don't understand this, but I just want to assure you they are not the same. And then lettuce has race 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're not the same as race 1, So when you talk verticillium wilt, and you start talking races, understand that every crop has its own discrete race, and it's not this, race 1 doesn't go across crops. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I just want to warn you that when you start talking about something like verticillium wilt, don't make this mistake I did, which said, oh, well, it's resistant to race 1 on this crop, so it has to be resistant to race 1 on that crop. No, they're not the same.
But in your last talk, you said that you were doing tomatoes grafting because it was watermelon was grown or something like that.
I graft watermelon. On my program, I focus on watermelon grafting because watermelon, verticillium, watermelon are susceptible.
With the same as tomatoes?
No, tomatoes are not susceptible on the same fields. So I can grow tomatoes and watermelon side by side in exactly the same field. Watermelon are susceptible and tomato are not. So it's not the same, same pathogen does not attack all these different crops.
I think I have been working on verticillium a lot, but looking at it now, since we have different species, that was the verticillium wilt on tomato is, I think one of them is verticillium galgae, and the other one is verticillium, the species is different, so.
So alba, but I only
Alba.
work on dahlia. This is all dahlia. So we isolate We isolate our pathogens. I'm not going to go into all of that. We pull our soil samples, we isolate our pathogens, we do Koch's postulates. Right, we identify the pathogen, we do PCR, we know exactly what our pathogen is, then we re-inoculate our plants to show that it's causing the disease. So we've done all of that. And I just want to warn you that with verticillium wilt, when you've got a susceptible one crop, that doesn't mean your other crop is susceptible. Now in this region you have race 2 on tomato, and there you have a problem. We don't have race 2 on tomato. So what this means is I can use tomato as a rootstock for my eggplant, and I can get resistance through the tomato as a rootstock. So I just wanted to point that out to you. So this is what our grafting trials look like. Again, this is 5 acres of organic grafted eggplant. And one of the challenges working on farms, and how many of you do on-farm trials? Nobody? One person? Yeah, a couple? All right, one of the challenges of working on an on-farm trial is that oftentimes you'll go out and they have picture plots. They've decided that their market is over, so they till your plots down, which is what happened to us this last year. So it can be a real challenge trying to actually get the complete data set when you're working on on-farm plots. But this is what our plots look like. So this is my graduate student Sahar. This is the farm manager. Our plots are like right here, and then this is 5 acres of eggplant around it, organic eggplant. But the grower is interested enough where now he's asking us, so now we have a whole series of plants going over to his field next week. And he's going to be planting them out again, so we'll see what he ends up doing. So again, just kind of walking you through what this looks like, and I just want to give you an understanding of what the planting schedule and that looks like. So for us, on that field in eastern Washington, we're seeding March 4th for Night Shadows to Scion, one rootstock Estevino. Then March 9th, so 5 days later, we're seeding these other rootstocks. And the reason we're doing that is because these rootstocks grow faster than that rootstock or the Scion. So you have split seeding dates. You need to know how fast they grow so that when you go to graft, the stem diameter is the same. So we do pre-trials to figure that all out. We do 72 cell trays. Most of certainly the commercial growers are going using a smaller cell size. We just use this because it's what I have and it's convenient. March 24th, we grafted the plants. They went into the healing chamber. March 31, we had 100% success with all of our grafted plants. And as I said, they go over next week to the field. One of the other things I've learned is that I'm in Northwest Washington. The grower is in Eastern Washington. I'm in a marine climate. He is in a high desert. And so we have to move our plants over. We have to give them at least 3 days or 5 days to acclimate to the environment before they go into the field. So I turn them over to him, and then he acclimates them, and then he transplants them. And again, it just matters. Those grafted plants they cave if you just put them out, at 85 degrees, overnight. It just doesn't work. So again, this is what our chambers look like. This is our eggplant, for example. So first 3 days, it's all closed up. Day 4, we start to pick up the shade cloth. And then from that period on, the whole chamber basically just gets opened up until everything comes off and the plants are just moved over to the next bench. So that's what it looks like for us. I just wanted to give you this kind of information. So this is the temperature and humidity. So temperature is the blue line here, humidity is the red line. And let's see, 100% humidity is the red line. So you can see that we're at 100% humidity for the first 5 days. And at that point, right here, the black shade cloth is coming off. And at this point, the whole chamber is being opened up. You can just kind of see how the two things, how the humidity comes down, but the temperature actually stays pretty much the same. This is light. So again, the chamber is closed for the first 3 days right here. So there's no light going in. Then we start to open it up, and then shade cloth comes off, and then the plants are on the bench. And so this is just your night and day cycle with no light and full light for the day. So what we're trying to, having a graduate student, we're really trying to understand, what are the real mechanics between temperature, light, and relative humidity in healing plants. So we have this experiment set up right now with tomato. So here is a successfully healed tomato, and that is a completely unsuccessful healing of tomato. And we're just testing these combinations of light and relative humidity. And just understand that, our process of grafting tomato, we have 98% success without thinking about it. But really the question in my own mind is, do you have to do all of those things to get 98% success? So looking at all the growers around the country and the world, people are doing different things. They're not using shade cloth, they are using shade cloth. Maybe some of them aren't using black plastic, or, they're just using all these different things. And my question is, well, how necessary is any of this? So we just have this experiment just starting right now, and I apologize, there's a healing regime for you again, just to walk you through it. But here's the treatment, So this is the standard, this is what everybody does for the most part, is no light and 100% relative humidity to start with for those first 3 days. So what we're looking at combinations of light, so 0, 25, and 50%, and combinations of relative humidity, 50 and 100%, with varying combinations. And we're just using, again, these totes, clear plastic totes, and then we're covering them with different fabrics to achieve those methods. And here's what that looks like. And you can, I don't know, it's hard to see that, but those plants are all wilted on the inside. This is the day after grafting. They're all wilted. There's humidity here, so the humidity is actually kind of stuck to the sides of the bin. You can maybe see it right there. The water's running down the sides of the bin to give you that humidity. And these are our results. So this is Ferouz, my graduate student who's working on this. And our results with tomatoes, this is our experiment that we just finished, 100% success for all treatments except the 50% light and 50% relative humidity. So what that tells us is, I don't think we need to have 100% humidity. I don't think we need to have 0 light for those first 3 days. I think you can vary up that environment. And to me, that's kind of interesting. That goes a little bit against the grain, which is everybody says you have to have this and you have to have that. For tomatoes, I don't think you do. So just letting you know that there's opportunity here for really experiments and really understanding what is necessary and what isn't necessary. She measured plant height because we could see pretty quickly that there was a big difference in plant height across the treatments. So this is kind of an unfair measurement because those plants were dead. but we measure them anyway. So with the 0 light, you can see that the plants were much shorter than with the 25% light and the 50% light. So the more light you have coming in, the taller the transplant. So the less light you have coming in, the shorter the transplant. And then you just have to decide, do you want a shorter transplant or do you want a taller transplant? If there's a preference one way or the other, then you can use light to manipulate the height of the transplant. But in terms of grafting success, all of these survived 100%. So it gives you an opportunity to manipulate your environment to get a plant.
Kara, let's have a question. For your height, did you know that did you notice below the graft union, did that part elongate or remain the same?
Oh, that's a great question. So Sunjun is asking if, and it's hard to see in this picture right here, he's asking if the area below the graft union, if that elongated, or if all the plant height was basically in the scion material. I'm going to say that in this stage, and these were just measured probably 10 days after grafting, all the height was in the scion.
Okay.
So within 10 days after grafting, there's very little growth going on below the graft
The
union.
reason I'm asking is sometimes the farmers don't understand that the graft union has to be above the ground.
Yeah.
They seem to know, but they forgot. And so when they plant them, the graft union is in the ground.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's always a big problem. Yeah, so if you're using grafted plants for disease control, and you plant your graft union below the soil, then your soil comes into contact with your scion, and guess what? You get disease. That's, yeah. Did you have no, sorry.
The plants that are bigger, do they also have a bigger or they are kind of slender?
They're definitely more slender, but they look perfectly healthy at this point. Now, we're not taking these on into the field. So, we're not, in this project, we're not following these plants into the field. We're just looking at the healing process.
I'm just, wondering what would be better, to have the longer plants or the shorter ones, but with a thicker stem.
Right. Yeah, so the question is, what do you want? Do you want a shorter plant, thicker stem? Do you want a longer plant with thinner stem? We didn't measure, that's another good point. We didn't measure stem diameter, and I think maybe we'll go ahead and do that and see, just so you can see.
And also, how did you measure the light? When you say
We have a light meter.
50%.
We have a light meter. All right, so we have a couple of other things that we're working on. This is another student I have, so we're looking at using anti-transference to reduce the wilting on the scion after grafting. We're looking at the watermelon. We're really focusing on watermelon in my program because that's where our growers are. We have watermelon growers. We don't have tomato growers. So I work with watermelon growers because that's what our industry is. And then we're also focusing on rootstock management, rootstock regrowth management of watermelons. And we do quite a bit of grafting workshops. In my program, we've done 1 or 2 a year, and then we've always had students that come through on classes. We do class visits, class tours, and they always want to do a vegetable grafting session, so we always do that as well. So continuing the education outreach in my program. And then these are just what the extension publications look like. They're on the website right there if you haven't had a chance to take a look. And that's it. So I don't know if I have time for questions or not. Yep.
The grafts that have wilted, will they perk back up?
No.
Or that's it?
No, so they reach critical wilting point.
Okay.
Yeah, and see, and as a grower, you kind of have to make a decision. So even if they're not, so critical wilting point, they're dead. And then for those that are kind of iffy, you have to decide if you're going to spend the time and effort to baby them along. Because they're going to take longer to get to a healthy transplant to go in the field than a plant that just comes out healthy. So you might want to, if it's worth your time, you could segregate them. So what you could do perhaps is sort them into 2 different staging areas maybe, but you're probably going to have to manage them maybe a little bit differently. And you don't want to move them out to the field as early as the other ones, I don't think.
I think, Kara, I want to add 2 things to what you talked about. The first thing is for the humidifier thing. Back in the old days when I was doing breeding work, we couldn't purchase those things, it just don't exist. So we actually just did what you said, spray around,
Yeah.
with water under that, and cover with plastic. And the grafted transplant is going to wilt. But first day you look really sad, you look nervous, but they come back.
Yeah.
So no humidifier is definitely fine. The second thing is, let me see what the next week. I forgot.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you water the plants during the healing period?
Do you water the plants during the healing period? No, we don't, because there's no connection between the scion and the rootstock.
Yeah.
So anything you put on the scion is not, on the rootstock is not going up into the scion. There's no connectivity. So there's no point in watering the rootstock. So that's why you need the humidity. So all the moisture that the scion is able to absorb, it's absorbing from the air. That's where your humidity becomes important.
Yeah, we don't need that. I remember what I want to say. During the heating process, the first several days, especially when you try to keep 100% moisture, sometimes you have trouble with disease. So what we've been doing is in the morning, maybe every 2 or 3 days in the morning, during the day, we just lift the plastic up, let the fresh air go in.
Right.
Yeah, for several times. That really helped, and we haven't had any issue with disease.
Yeah, if you're gonna, so we get powdery mildew. So for us, powdery mildew is endemic. I don't know, does anybody else have powdery mildew? Yeah, so greenhouse, powdery mildew, right? They just go together. And we're organic, and so a lot of my research is organic, and so we don't really have effective mechanisms to control powdery mildew in the greenhouse. So what Sanjun just said is you've got to really, you've got to pay a lot of attention to your temperature and humidity to try to keep it down.
Maybe my case is different because I have my own greenhouse.
Yeah.
Right? Just move one thing, so put it down here and do stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so, and once the plants come out, then we can usually control it. And the other thing we're doing is we're just doing sanitation. When we start to get disease symptoms on the leaves, we can just go in and prune off those leaves, and generally that'll take care of it for the last day or 2 we need. Once the plants come out onto the bench, it generally dissipates, because the humidity level comes down, it's not so extreme. But powdery mildew for us is our big problem in the healing process.
I can't remember who told me this, and I could be totally wrong because it's against what you're saying. But somebody told me that until the 3 days healing goes, you're not getting complete uptake of nutrients and moisture. But they told me that, and I wish I could remember what study it was. They said that 10 seconds after making the graft, there begins to take some water nutrient uptake begins to go into the scion.
I'm guessing that's coming out of either the Spanish program or the Dutch program. They've done some really good research. I don't know anybody in the United States who's done that.
I was just amazed that it would occur that quickly. So
yeah, the general frame of mind is that the callus tissue doesn't form until at least 3 to 5 days, And so in terms of, having enough water to keep that sign alive, it's 3 to 5 days.
Right, but that's why you need the humidity in
Right.
it until the callus forms, but prior to it forming, there's still, it seems to still be
Yeah.
some up
Well,
there.
and there's enough water, and I guess again, getting back to the question, do we water the plants? The answer is no, because you're not losing water
Right.
from that plug.
Right,
The water's all still there, so there's no point in adding more water.
right.
It's detrimental.
That 70, 75 degrees for tomatoes, is that air temperature?
It's air temperature.
Have you tried, or would there be any advantage for like a heat mat that's about 70 degrees?
It all depends on what your temperatures are. So for us, we're in a glass greenhouse. And my biggest issue is, so we set the temperature control, and when that sun comes out,
Yeah.
temperature just spikes.
So if you're inside an extension office in a meeting room, a heat pad might be good.
Yeah. Which is, basically if you're in an inside environment, which is perfectly fine, which works perfectly fine for grafting, you just need to get to that temperature. So however you get to that temperature is
Our
perfectly
rooms,
fine.
so we're in an old building and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, there's no one way to do it.
okay.
Yeah, heating pads
I
underneath
didn't
it.
want to fry something.
No.
I
Green,
guess I do it once anyway.
Yeah, just don't use your hot pad from home, right?
Yeah.
Then you'll fry something. No, but the nursery heating pads, absolutely, we use the nursery heating pads, like Sandra said, to, we start all of our plants on heating pads.
So, but you are talking about atmospheric temperature in that healing chamber, not the heating pad will heat the soil.
Well, the heating pad is gonna heat underneath, and you're gonna get heat going up through the unit. Because your plants are just gonna sit, your trays are gonna sit on that heating pad.
But you can heat the soil also, like.
Yeah, you're gonna get warming of the soil as well as
What
the
will be the-
whole.
So you don't need any new growth in that.
No, you don't need new growth, so it's just however you can get to the, I'm just not somebody who's gonna say, no, you can't do that. I think you can be creative and get to the environment you want using the
I'll
resources
just
you
try
have.
it. If it burns them, I'll try something different.
Right, I think you should try it.
You do anything 90% success.
So,
I'm definitely on the end of, I think you should try it. I think everybody should try anything that they think is interesting, and if it works. Because in my mind, a lot of this is coming down to us, this is the way I look at it, a lot of this is coming down to us saying, this is what you have to do. And I think I'm finding that that's absolutely false. This is not what you have to do. There's not a recipe that you have to follow. You get to do whatever you want, and as long as you get success, you're doing the right thing. There's not any one specific way you have to do anything. So every operation I've seen does something a little bit different, and it all works for them.
So how are they doing this in 500 BC without all this stuff?
Yeah, well, you want my guess? So what they were doing is they were grafting, so they had knives. So they were splicing and grafting, then they were probably putting their plants in a bed area, and they're probably just putting fronds or grasses over that. So, probably just a stick frame, I'm guessing, but it could very well have been something more like the heated pit greenhouses that China has, where if you go into the soil, you get a soil buffering temperature, but then you just cover it with grass or whatever, and you get that light, reduced light. Doesn't have to be complicated. Because I work in Africa, I work in East Africa, I work in Central America, and we do all of this with no resources whatsoever.
No plastic.
No plastic. No plastic, no grafting clips. I mean, we use drinking straws. So working in Central America, we went to the market and we bought all of our supplies in the market, and that's what we did to graft.
How about no electricity?
No electricity. You don't need electricity to do any of this. As long as you've got an environment that's conducive. So if you've got, daylight that's, to grow a transplant in the first place, you don't need electricity for any of it because you're not going to have a heating pad.
I was going to rhinoceros and do her next.
So 1,500 years ago, you got your temperatures up because you used a hotbed. Right? Does everybody know what a hotbed is?
Yeah, sure.
Right? You have fresh manure, you put down a couple of inches of soil, right? You kind of enclose that a little bit, that manure starts to decompose, voila, hotbed. That's probably what they did, 1,500 years ago.
Let's give you a question. Where do you get those stick those things wrapped I need those.
I just use drinking straws.
Chicken straws?
What do you use? Your little white ones.
I don't know where they come from.
I go to Starbucks and grab them. I
They
don't-
look like those.
If everybody you know goes to Starbucks next time, right? 5 every single time. How many can you get in a month?
Ours are round though, so they fit in the clip easy.
Yeah, ours are round as well. So I don't know, I think ours are a little drink, you want to know, I'll ask my staff,
It
'cause,
might be drink strips.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
little,
stir.
yeah, stir sticks.
Coffee stirrer,
Yeah,
sure.
This year, my plans, my ceilings were a little bit bigger than I could do, what I didn't do earlier, so they just like grab them, just kind of lie down like the.
Yeah, no, you gotta have those sticks.
It's really bad, especially when you ask students to mow them, you get trouble. So I eventually I ended up using some of the stables, the stable to
Right.
to put in there, that helped a little bit. But you don't tie them up, you're not fit to the clip really well.
Yeah.
So they're gonna fall again completely the other way, so I had some trouble, but I saw that as a great idea.
Yeah, no, we've been using those for, I don't know, 5, 6 years. Like I said, we started with bamboo, because, it's environmental, right, degradable, and it was a disaster.
I can buy some chopsticks.
Wood, they gotta be plastics. I'll warn you against wood, don't use wood.
Good, okay.
Like I said, we sterilized them, we did everything, after reuse, and they get disease. And then the plants get disease, so I wouldn't do it. All right? Thank you.